Google had a big change.
Ah, that's what it is, Google. Okay, welcome everyone to Women and AI, Who Writes the Story. This is our first session of 2, the story we're being told, which is the theme of today's session. What story are we being told as women around AI? And we're going to just expose that story and share it, and then hopefully loosen it a little bit, because some of the stories we are hearing don't resonate with us, and that's because the women aren't telling the stories. And I'm delighted to have Bethany and Vivian and Nicole with us today, who are going to offer their different perspectives on AI from the lens of a woman in education. So let's just start with a simple question. I'm going to invite all 3 of you to tell me what's the first word that comes to your mind at the moment when you hear AI, and then just introduce yourself by telling me your name, your organisation, and what drew you to this conversation. So let's start with, in alphabetical order, Beth.
I think the first word that comes to my mind when I hear AI is potential. And I think that can go both ways, as in potential for good and also potential to be used in a negative way as well. My name is Bethany Ewan Furman. I work for Minerva Virtual Academy, which is an online secondary school in the UK. And I'm here today for this conversation because I think it's really important that we reflect on the perspectives that are being shared and making sure that everyone's voice is heard in this ever-changing space.
Thanks, Beth. Let's move to Nicole.
Yeah, I like the word that you chose, Beth. That was a good one. I would go with marketing at the moment. I think a lot of AI conversations at the moment is all due to very fancy marketing that we're being pushed upon us, especially when what story we're being told. That all comes through marketing channels. So at the moment, AI and marketing are very much linked for me. And but for my role, essentially, I'm the co-founder of Did You Know This? And I have spent maybe the last couple of years, well, really since November 2022, when ChatGPT was released onto the public, answering questions from fellow teachers, just going, what do we do? How do I use this? How not to use this? And what do I need to do first? And I think I've just always been very committed to making sure that there's as many diverse voices in a conversation as possible. And sometimes that diversity isn't even as diverse as I would like, but it at least starts with women here. And as being a network lead for Women Ed Northern Ireland, this is also a session that I've done with like my feminist approach to AI. So I'm really glad the synergy that we're going to have in this call, as well as I pass it over then to Vivian.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you for the recommendation for Women Ed right at the beginning. So I'm Vivian Porritt. I'm president of Women Ed, a global charity for women across the globe, because we want women to lead in schools. And that's absolutely why Women Ed wanted to work with CVP on this programme. One sentence about AI for me is I have to have 2 halves, because initially it was, well, that's got nothing to do for me. But some of you know I had a stroke last year, and in my rehabilitation, it's always been highlighted as a way to learn for me, because I can't do some other things. So I've been using it, and I've also been reading about it. Can I give you a quote?
Mm-hmm.
Female founded AI companies earn 6 times less venture capital investment than male counterparts. Women are also 13 times less likely to file an ICT patent. And a McKinsey report report warns that women are more likely to men to lose their jobs to AI. So that fired me up. And that's why I want to join this conversation and hope that so very many others in the women ed community will as well, because we're just tackling the gender disparity again.
100%, Vivian. And that's our next mission. We, just to give you some context, we partnered, myself and women, CVP and Women Ed, myself and Vivian got our heads together on a coaching program, which I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. I'll just do my intro so that everyone knows who I am. My name is Yasmin Arif, and I'm Director of Education at CVP Group. We're a training provider based in the Northwest, but we work with organisations across England. And for me, the word AI at the moment has connotations of disconnect. I can't quite gel with it like I did with the coaching. So our first big program at CVP when I started was the coaching program, and I trained as a coach, and we partnered with Women Ed to train many, up to 100, I think, leaders in education, a large majority of them women from the Women Ed community, as qualified coaches. And I think it's because coaching is predominantly, in terms of its thought leadership, and the big thinkers and the people who write the books are led by women, and the attributes of a great coach, holding space, and being non-judgmental, and the kind of the warm neutrality, I think women lean into very well and do very well. So it resonated with me, coaching. The government ended the funding for coaching, unfortunately, quite recently. So we've pivoted to AI, and there's still a disconnect for me. But I'm running with it because I know that women, if they get their hands on this, are going to do it so well. I've seen what they've done with the coaching and the innovation that's come off the back of that qualification. So I just absolutely think it's disconnect now. But I know when we've got our first cohort through and some of the women have led on this, it's going to be not a disconnect, it's going to be a connect. It's going to resonate with me. So what drew me to this conversation is we need to start the conversation, and then we're going to do great things off the back of this. So now we've done the intros, let's just have a bit of a right size before we dig deep into our panel discussion. Why this conversation? Well, we've just said we're hearing a lot about AI. Nicole used the word marketing, which means it's reaching us at this sort of ridiculously fast pace, but we hear far less about who gets to shape it. We're defaulting to a narrow demographic, as usual, who are leading and shouting out and running with this. And today's discussion isn't about becoming AI experts, even though I've realized recently we've got loads of women AI experts already in the field. It's about becoming critical thinkers, informed leaders, and active participants in shaping the future, which is what all four of us I know do really well. The story we're being told is what we're focusing on today. Our second session will be more about the story we want to hear, because at the moment we're hearing words like innovation, productivity, fear, competition, and speed. And those are being pushed by that narrow demographic of thought leaders in AI, but that's their story. We now need to write our story, but before we do, we need to just tap into, like, go up source a little bit, like, where's that current story coming from? And it'll probably be what we're used to as, you know, feminist thinkers. This is just the same problems we've experienced, but it's a different medium that it's coming through, which is tech, right? So we're going to start with Nicole, who's going to present a very important question. And Nicole is going to give us some of her thoughts and ideas, which I'm sure will all get us all thinking and bounce some of our own ideas off Nicole once she's shared. So I'm going to pass to you, Nicole.
Thank you. Yeah, so question one then, when you think about the story we're currently being told about AI, whose voices are loudest and whose voices are missing? And you're right, Yasmin, when we think about this conversation from a lot of us being on the same page already as feminists, we're going to recognize that the voices that are loudest right now are the tech bros or the white middle-aged men. I do a session with students and adults actually at the very start of most of my AI workshops, where I ask them to put their hands up, and when they think about someone who is leading tech, and to put their hands down whenever I stop saying the categories that they are thinking of. And I go right from, gender, are they English speaking, American, their class or wealth bracket, their race, are they a parent even as well? I think is an interesting one to start seeing where people split there. Are they married? What's their sexuality as well? Like the whole way down, and you start to realize that actually by the end of it, a good quarter of the room have all stuck with the same type of person that I'm guiding them towards. And other people who have just dropped off at like 1 or 2 points. And that tells us a problem with recruitment in the first place, of the same type of people who are recruited and promoted into positions where they're leading and being the ones who are telling these stories and steering or being able to get access to the finance that Vivian was talking about earlier. In the first place, it's often just purely psychological, that it's going with what you know, and what a lot of investors know are men, and what a lot of investors who are also men know is their fellow peers, and they want to go with patterns that have worked for them in the past. And what's worked for them in the past is going for the college dropout, cool tech bro guy who just is coding in his garage and building something really cool that's going to turn into a unicorn company, and they want to get in. And whenever you're going down that mindset of the stronger, better, faster, harder type speed and competition, that is often going to go further along patriarchy and capitalism, where most of what the conversations that are deserve to happen in this space are a lot more nuanced. And when we talk about, like, Beth, your first word being like potential, a lot of that potential comes hugely down to the amount of collaboration that we could have as a society, as societies, to work in this space. And I think one more thing before I throw it over to you as well for the panel here is, I think there's some voices that are becoming increasingly loud right now, and that's female celebrities. And I've been seeing it maybe since like about March or April time. Like Reese Witherspoon came out doing huge promotion that women can't be left behind in AI and encouraging everyone to adopt it, but faced huge backlash because she's obviously the owner of a book club and a creative production company. And those creative industries have been hugely hit by IP and copyright infringement. So she faced a lot of backlash also because she hugely promoted crypto a couple of years back, and then that backfired and things like that. So I think there's a question and a conversation to be had there about trust. Then you have Mel Robbins, who has like 12 million followers or more, encouraging people to like, women, all you have to do is put all of your financial documents into Copilot. Go and take all of your documents, put it into Copilot and ask it this prompt. And that's immediately giving all of your sensitive financial information to an AI engine, to Microsoft. And I'm like, that's hugely irresponsible. But there was probably a great deal with Microsoft done to encourage that type of promotion. And then we have a very recent one, Kylie Jenner, glamorizing the Meta glasses and glamorizing surveillance technology that is going to be on all the time. And I think that's done very intentionally. I think that's done because as much as we, might roll our eyes or be, like, oh, classic tech bros leading in this space, they're extremely tuned in to marketing, and the consumer market is held by women. Women make the majority of purchases on a personal consumer level, and that's no accident then to choose Kylie Jenner to promote a personal product like the Meta glasses over choosing a man to do it. Because you've got the next generation coming up choosing who they want to align with, what's cool, what's stylish. And Meta have positioned these glasses not as anything to help with productivity or to help with, to help with your thinking or to help anything other than Kylie Jenner's wearing these, they look really cool. And that for me is where the marketing comes into it again. So when we think about whose voices are missing from that, well, it's essentially anyone who's not ultra wealthy. You're not hugely wealthy and not in a position of capital control. Your voice is very hard to get heard and to be respected in this space. In large arenas, you have the entire global majority are hugely missing from all of these conversations. And that's also because they're largely missing from the internet in the first place. So of course they're going to be missing from AI. So we have a lot of work to do in leveling the playing field and making it equal, even just in terms of getting data to certain parts of the world, never mind to get AI to them. There's lots of gaps there to be done. There's huge inequity that hasn't changed in a number of decades. And it's still a fight that we all have to fight. And there's good work to be done. There's good people to do it with as well, but there's a lot to get cracking on with. So I'm going to throw it out there for anyone who wants to chip in on anything I said. Go for it, Beth.
Thank you. So just jumping off the back of that and thinking about the kind of celebrity endorsements that you were referring to, Nicole, I think one of the things that is certainly amplifying voices when it comes to AI is the role of social media. And I know from experience in schools that for a lot of our young people and our students in the world, a lot of the main messaging that they are receiving about AI is coming through social media channels. And that might be through celebrity endorsements, it might be through influencers, and it also might be from those who are trying to drive the narrative in certain directions, which means that when we're then in schools having conversations with them, a lot of the education that they've already received has been dominated by social media. And I think that that's something that makes this new technology so interesting, because when we look at the rate of adoption and how it has been adopted at an unprecedented scale in comparison to the internet and other technological innovations, one of the key players that didn't exist for other things was social media. And I think that really is driving this.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, because you think about what some of the social media platforms have done recently. There's one, you almost cannot escape the built-in AI. They make it incredibly hard for you to opt out. And if you haven't opted out, or I have now like a monthly audit that I do, because I know even though I have opted out 1 month, doesn't mean that they haven't changed some settings somewhere, and I'm now opted in for some other really niche subgroup of training. So the fact that like Facebook, for example, has access to your entire camera roll unless you switch that off. And why do they need access to your entire camera roll? Well, they tell you that, hey, we're just going to surface some designs for you that you might like to promote an event that you have coming up. And I'm like, you shouldn't know about that event that I have coming up, because that's too much data that you have learned from me. So no, I'm going to switch that off. And then you look at Instagram and bringing in your algorithm button to give you like a false agency almost over the amount of control you have in your algorithm. So it'll tell you like, here's what your algorithm's currently made up of. Do you want to change it? And whilst the transparency is interesting, I think it's also grossly simplifying what an algorithm is. It's not just 3 sentences that tells you the type of stuff that you're looking at. But I think that's totally intentional, because it only serves big tech if we don't know how tech works. So if you can summarize it into beautiful 3 little sentences, then we are easy customers for life, essentially, because we'll never know how to do anything different than what we're served up. And we're going to take the path of least resistance as humans. That's why we cut corners when we're walking a path that takes an L shape or a right angle. We go across a diagonal. It's just human nature to go where it's least friction is going to happen, because we all want an easy life. We're all, knackered. We're all really tired. We're all exhausted, and we're trying to get through things as best as we can. So having a frictionless experience with technology is fast becoming, from a social media perspective, obviously the quick dopamine fixes that you can get, but you will very rarely see something that you hugely disagree with on social media, because then it wouldn't be enjoyable and then you'd want to come off it. So that's where we start. If children are starting off on social media, and the age debate is for another time, no matter when they start into it, they're immediately starting into it so that they can be marketed to, so that they can be sold to, so that they can, know that you went on the New Look website and didn't make a purchase, but somebody in your similar age profile went on the New Look website twice before they made a purchase. So we'll just give you another ad and then you'll go make a purchase. Like, all of these little components being added up makes it a very uneven playing field for our wallets whenever we engage in social media, which is free. And it's that classic thing, is if it's free, you're the product. And we are, unfortunately.
I think the things that really worry me about it are all of the sexual elements of it. Young girls being targeted, and people's clothes being taken off, and all of that kind of thing. And that's not acceptable. Yeah. And I do think there's got to be greater recognition that there are some things that the AI companies are doing that are not acceptable at all. But then the governments don't have that much strength over them, do they? Because some of these AI leaders are multimillionaires, and they're not going to do what a government that they don't agree with is going to happen. So I think that's the really worrying part, because I don't want our young girls to get used to anything like that, because they're going to lose their belief in the world around them. Then it seems to me.
Definitely. I see that with the whistleblower, the Facebook whistleblower, Frances Hagen at the moment. Like, she wrote the book about Sarah Wynne Williams. She wrote the book about basically just lifting the lid on Meta, on Facebook, on what has been going on with them and the things that they were doing. And all the stuff that you were saying, Vivian, is like knowingly targeting teenage girls, with certain content, and doing that because it keeps them hooked and engaged and addicted to the platform. So but she's now been essentially embargoed, and she can't say anything in public anymore, and she's been massively squashed and silenced. And I think when we talk also about whose voices are missing, I'm like victims, and that's also intentional, is to keep them silent and to keep that so squashed down and to blow over it as much as possible, and to cause enough distraction elsewhere in the news and in the headlines that even when something does come out, like Sarah Wynne Williams, her story, that won't hit as many of the headlines as it might have done on any other given Tuesday,
And that more than anything else is why I want more women to be involved, because can I share my question now?
Yeah, it goes. Yeah, let's move to. We don't have to do it in order. Let's do this in the order that feels right for us. So let's move to your question, Vivian, and then we can go back to me and Beth.
Imagine we are looking back 10 years from now. What story do you hope people tell about the role of women, and what contribution they shaped? What did they do that helped shape AI? And it's really, I think, looking at the skills that women have, because you were mentioning that, Nicole, weren't you? I think more women are ethical, as opposed to some of those multimillionaires. I think they are collaborative. They want to work with other people. They don't just want to lead the world themselves. And they're encouraging of other women. They want to work collaboratively with others, and they'll bring more women in to do that, and they'll train them and they'll help them and they'll support them. Now, I don't see any of that at the moment in the development of AI at all, really. There might be some small groups doing it, but I don't see that because of the marketing, as you were saying. So I do think it's essential that the program CVP is putting together is really important. And I think we've also got to think about, as we keep moving on, how do we celebrate what is happening when this program starts? Because I think we've got to get really loud and clear about why we're doing this.
Yeah, for sure. Because even when you were speaking then, Nicole, the knowledge that was coming out from you, I wasn't aware of some of the things that you were saying, you know? I was like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And knowledge is power, right? So AI education is the first step, because ignorance is bliss for the millionaires, isn't it?
Yeah.
And if we can just get some knowledge and then start being able to put some filters, and, you know, you talked about doing an audit. I was like, God, that's an actual thing, doing a social media audit. You know what I mean? Like these and I'm not an intelligent person. It's just I haven't got bandwidth or not, or even just the education for it to some extent. So you're right,
Yeah.
Vivian. It starts with the education piece.
And I would say, like, there's power in knowing what you don't know. There is so much I
Yeah.
do not know about AI, but I'm aware that that serves these huge multi-corporate monopolies. Like, these huge corporations benefit from what I don't know. And then I also know that there will be lots of people who know even more than me, but still feel like they're not even close to the surface or close to what can feel like it's making an impact, can feel like it's going to make a difference. Like just knowing is one thing, but it's then how do we overcome the paralysis? And I feel that's actually where women play a huge role, is the community support. Because like I went to like my women ed session back in September. It was my first time talking about AI at women ed, and normally, because normally I stick very closely to the themes and normally go along the lines of diversity, and I was like, no, I think it's really important to start this conversation here in women ed. And I found that I was using it almost as a way to, I've been carrying all of this stuff that I've been thinking and feeling. I don't know what to do with it, so I'm going to put it out into the room and then see what you're all going to do with it. And then we were just instantly problem solving and instantly going, maybe we should put a policy in our schools. Maybe we should have this. Maybe we should look at our consent forms again for what we're posting of children on social media. Maybe we should go and do that. You know, all of this started coming as I've heard all of this and I've seen all of this. What do you want me to do with it? And I think that from the community perspective of supporting, but then also of challenging, because I think and this is another shout out for disruptive women, I think there's nothing that will annoy huge corporations and AI leaders more than disruptive women. Because yes, by all means, market with some women, and like I do see and I do use AI tools, but I try so hard to not take a shortcut for my brain and try to very intentionally use it a different way. I sometimes go and do data poisoning, which means that I will go and intentionally tell it things or look up things that have nothing to do with who Nicole O'Connor is, because I want to just confuse the profile that it has on me. So, I mean, is it going to make a massive difference? Does it know I'm doing that because I'm telling everybody that I'm doing that? Yeah, but if I keep talking about it, other people might think about doing it. And that's kind of where the fact that women talk to each other so much and are willing to be vulnerable and willing to be, you know, here, what about this AI stuff? Or what's the crack with that Claude? You know, I haven't heard anyone, just having those offhand conversations and feeling like you can go to another woman and ask silly questions, which we love silly questions, you know, I feel like that's where change will happen, because then when people are a little bit more informed, they can go and ask the hard questions of their school leaders, of their trusts, of whoever it needs to be, about why certain tools are in schools, or why certain tools are collecting certain data and certain practices are happening, and so on. It all starts with a conversation like this.
Yeah, I think looking back in 10 years, I don't necessarily want to see that all women have accepted AI and are using it in their everyday lives. But what I would like to see is that all women have the opportunity to learn about AI, and therefore they could make those decisions themselves from an informed perspective of when they think it's appropriate to be used, what they think is appropriate to be used, and they've had that opportunity to reflect and draw those boundaries for themselves. I think we're not kind of suggesting that AI is fantastic for everything and that everyone should be using it. But I think, like we've said, knowledge is power. And so it's really important that those education opportunities are out there, and that women also feel like they have the space to take up those education opportunities. Because I think one of the issues that comes up time and time again is workload and balancing work and home life and all of those things. And I think that perhaps that is one of the key things that is perhaps preventing many women currently from being able to find the space and the time to take up education opportunities around AI. And that's perhaps why we're seeing more AI leaders that are male at the moment, because there wasn't that opportunity and that time and that space for them to invest in themselves.
Mm.
Yeah, definitely. It's bandwidth in the initial stages. Certainly when you're learning something new and upskilling women in AI, it takes cognitive load, and we know women are already overloaded with invisible labor and whatnot. But hopefully, once that education's in place, women can use AI to reduce some of the load that they're carrying and make their lives better. And I wonder, Beth, whether while we're on a roll, we just go to your question, because as we're talking in this conversation, I swing between it could be great and exciting to when Nicole was talking about uploading financial data into AI, OpenAI, I keep thinking, what have I given my OpenAI recently? Oh, should I have done that? That fear. So Beth, do you want to lead with your question on this?
Yeah, sure. So my question is around that narrative of both hype and fear, and which is the most concerning, and which one, what conversation should we be having instead? And I think the hype and the fear, for me, on a daily basis, I'm a pendulum that is constantly swinging between both. I get excited when I find quick wins and solutions to help teachers manage their workloads better, or a tool that's going to help a student overcome a learning barrier. And then also I share a lot of fears about potential for cognitive dependency, potential for AI generated deepfake images and manipulation. I think there are so many things that could go wrong in this situation. And one of the kind of voices that I like to reflect on is Rose Luckin, who is a leader in AI and education out of UCL. And she has previously said kind of think fast or learn fast and act slow. And I think that that is a really good kind of phrase to keep in mind when you are processing concepts about AI. Try and think about it and learn about it as fast as you can, and try your best to keep up with this very fast moving technology that is changing on a daily basis. You open your Google and there's a new feature. But I think it's the act slowly that can really help us invest in the excitement of the hype, but also mitigate the fears. and make sure that anything that we are putting into place, we are checking the ethics behind it, we are checking the data privacy behind it, we are making sure that just because it looks exciting and it looks flashy and it's marketed in a way that, you know, makes it appealing to us, it isn't going to cause harm further down the line. So yeah, I think fast and learn fast and act more slowly is definitely kind of the conversation that I would drive in this space. But I'm keen to hear your thoughts.
We in Women Ed, we did a book chat on the book that I was quoting from, which is The New Age of Sexism: How the AI Revolution is Reinventing Misogyny.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very interested in misogyny because I've done quite a lot of work on that, and I've just done a post on LinkedIn about it, because I don't want us to feel that we have to go backwards again for the fourth, fifth, sixth time. And I think that's why we need a lot more women to join in and shift the barriers and shift the perspectives of what AI can do. Nicole, earlier you talked about other countries, you know, that they're going to be left out possibly. And again, that's just going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want that to happen to other people, other diversities, and I don't want it to happen to women again and again and again. So I think we've all got a real role to play in helping other women to see the possibilities of the use of AI that isn't greedy and isn't in the hands of men all of the time, because otherwise we'll just go backwards and backwards, is my belief.
Yeah.
I had the pleasure of meeting Laura Bates last week at the Festival of Education, and I went up to her and said about Women Ed doing a book club on it, and how that book horrified me so much that it inspired me to do the feminist approach to AI session back at the Women Ed on conference in Ulster Uni. And I said to Laura that, you know, there's almost like the everyday sexism project still needs to happen for the world of AI, you know, that is probably where the biggest amount of fear sits at the moment for me, is about the harm to women and children. And I think, again, if we go like to looking back in 10 years' time, I hope that's the role that women have played, is what they've always done, which is grassroots and activism to protect women and children. And I think once we get to a stage of regulation, just a bill, a policy, a law even, you know, that bans these apps that can create child sexual abuse material, deep fakes of other people. Once we get to that stage, we'll be a little bit closer to me not having as much fear all the time about AI. I think the other bit of the fear that I sit in is with mass surveillance, the amount of data that people put in. Like when you look at like what are the number one use cases for AI, it is for personal use. People using it as a counselor, as a therapist, as a advisor for, you know, for their careers. Like how do they ask for a promotion, or, you know, how do they break up with a boyfriend? Like those type of very deeply personal things are sitting in a big maths machine, and we don't really know how it's deleted, if it's deleted, how it's used outside of, even if you have gone and opted out of everything and you're doing your monthly audits to go around everything. It is time consuming, but gives me peace of mind. And I think one of the thought leaders in this space who I like to go to, I use her framework now for nearly everything in life, is Mara Bolas. She's an AI strategist for equitable and responsible adoption at Harvard University. and she has a framework called fierce ambivalence, which is essentially both. You can have hype and fear. So Beth, when you're saying like every day pendulum swinging, that's fierce ambivalence. And Mara was doing research into why women adopt AI less than men. And she wanted to like basically investigate, was it that we were just so risk adverse that we wouldn't go to something unless we 100% trusted it? But it wasn't. It was just that women are more risk aware. So even the fact that like that's the critical thinking piece right there, is the fact that you're questioning, should I put this into this tool? What's going to happen with this data when I put it out there? Like what, like hacks and cyber leaks happen all the time. And sometimes it's very well covered up that what has happened, you know, when we just suddenly go, oh wait, there's no food on the co-op shelves for a couple of weeks here. They were hacked, you know, or Marks and Spencer's can't cope with any orders right now. Why? And they don't say they were hacked. You know, there's so many things that if we have all of our financial advice, all of our personal advice, all of our work advice, if we put everything into one tool and that tool is hacked, you've basically given an entire like digital clone of yourself. And I think that's just so incredibly risky. And I think that comes down to, Vivian, something that you said about us looking at like the global south and other countries and not wanting to go backwards. And I think there's also an element here of we're going backwards with the amount that we're turning to a machine for help compared to turning to humans. And I think the global south, we have a lot of lessons to learn from there about how locally those communities organize and mobilize to help each other. Whereas I think sometimes when we look at Western societies and how even we put up gates and fences around our houses so that nobody can see in and nobody can look at us, and we don't know all of our neighbors' names on our streets and things like that, and how that village mindset has really gone from, and it is really being encouraged to go away from local societies now, so much so to the point where Amazon spends, it was like crazy millions, like maybe £8 million for a 30-second ad in the Super Bowl to promote a Ring doorbell finding your dog. It was like a search party feature. A lot of people saw through it and were like, that's not to search for dogs, that's to search for people, that's to search for illegal aliens, that's to search for our neighbors. And I think the more we talk about this and the more that we challenge, you know, how things are being marketed to us, then the hype of, oh wow, a new tool that's going to help, you know, help make my skin look like this, or a new tool that's going to change my lazy Friday afternoon email into something perfectly worded for Monday morning. Like, get past all of that and start looking at, you know, how might we be being exploited? Those more of those conversations are happening, and I think that's where we want to be in that critical thinking talk.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to pick up on your point there about critical thinking, and because I see and I use AI almost like a coach sometimes, and you would think as a coach needs to be objective, that an AI tool is objective, which actually links to my question, is AI objective? Because if it is objective, then surely it should be helping us. But actually, sometimes objectivity isn't always useful. And if people are going into it as a advice, you know, asking it for advice, asking it to be a coach, asking it to be a mentor, asking it to be a friend, and it's pulling on sources from the World Wide Web and other realms that are designed and created by men for men, then, like Vivian said, we could be regressing rather than moving forward. And I wonder, while I'm on this note, whether I could share with you all an example of what happened to me quite recently when I used it as a coach, and I challenged it on some misogyny, just to give you an idea of what this looks like in reality. So I was using one of the OpenAI tools, and I came across an instance that I felt was misogynistic, covertly. It wasn't an overt. I was like, I'm sure this doesn't feel right to me. So I put my problem into this OpenAI tool, and it, for me, was bias towards the other side, towards patriarchal thinking. And Nicole talked about how we always promote within our communities and with feminist thinking disruptive women and hold space for you to be disruptive. But the AI told me, I wrote it down here, it told me to be stay present, stay kind, stay grounded, generous, and connected. Which sounds so benevolent, but actually this situation didn't require that. It required challenge and disruption. So I then typed into it, I feel like you're being a bit biased. I said, I'm going to give you some kind of framework that I use to challenge misogyny. Like, for example, I gave it bell hooks and some of her writing as an example. And I said, can you just try and look at it from a feminist lens, maybe? And I had to challenge it that way. And it said back to me, it said, that approach is intended to avoid a state, but it also implies, yeah, it said, I said, I'd invite you to challenge your own patriarchal bias. Consider the sources you're using to support me, as they may have been built by patriarchal systems. And its response was, that approach is intended to avoid overstating conclusions, as in its response. But it can also, so it started to then backtrack, and this is what I was trying to get it to see. It said, I can see how I've underplayed how systemic power operates and how harm is experienced. So then it's starting to see my way of thinking. And it said, you asked me to consider patriarchal bias in my own framing. And I think that's a worthwhile prompt. AI systems, it admitted, are trained on vast amounts of human-generated texts. And those texts inevitably reflect the societies that produce them, including patriarchal assumptions. And it did then go on to say, looking back, I think I may have leaned too heavily towards preserving neutrality between your perspective and this person's, who I was challenging. It admitted neutrality can sometimes obscure power asymmetries. And I appreciate the challenge. But this was after a lot of me, you know, coaching it and challenging it and using my critical thinking to go, whoa, I don't think what you're saying sits right with me, because I don't think neutrality is fair play in this system where power is skewed. So it was a lot of deep thinking. And although it came round, it's also trained to be a bit of a sycophant, isn't it? And please you. So I'm just trying to demonstrate that, you know, coming to my question, which was, is AI neutral? Well, no, it's not. And no, we don't always want it to be. It's much more complex than that. So I guess to you three to get some feedback on that.
Yeah, I don't mind chipping in lightly on this. You said the point I was going to say. I was like, as much as it had came back with I realized that I have maybe leaned too far into it. The sycophancy is really clear there, but also it's okay for that one conversation. It's not going to remember that for the next conversation that you start or the next chat. It's back to its neutral stance, and its neutral position isn't the neutral position that you have. So what I do in this type of scenario, whenever I'm working with schools, or even just for my own agents that I have, when I'm setting up an agent, I upload into the sources what neutral is for me, or what my guiding principles are, and what I expect for a human in the middle, basically, of this, knowing that it can't be a human, you know. So right down to, I explicitly say, like, you know, ask me questions, don't make assumptions. Ask questions where I haven't given you enough detail for you to make before you make a judgment or give advice, because it will often, that's the hallucination part, where it will often just fill in the gap with something that makes sense from all the other lines of code that it has, going, oh, it must be this, and not recognize even sometimes the gender of the people involved. You know, quite often you'll see when those AI trends happen and people put up their graphics that they've made of, like, here's what my AI thinks about me, and how revealing that is about how much people give away about themselves. But also I really like the ones where women are posting and the AI has assumed that they're a man. And those ones are always very telling, because it's often a disruptive woman. It's often somebody who is challenging or is being, not the good girl. That's essentially the advice you were getting from AI, Yasmin, was just be a good girl. Just be polite and don't take up too much space, and just maintain the status quo and keep everybody calm, and you just absorb the hurt or whatever it is that was going on, and you just take it. So no, it can never be neutral. And I think that is actually probably lesson 101, is tech is never neutral.
There's an interesting description of that in the Laura Bates book. No one can work independently. The threat posed to the rights and freedoms of women and minoritized communities by emerging technology can't be mitigated by a single piece of legislation. Ultimately, what will make the big difference is the same thing we needed to change long before the metaverse or sex robots or whatever. It's the underlying misogyny and equality in our society, which these products either accidentally or maliciously amplify. And that's why I think women have to get involved, because otherwise it's going to be the regression that I've said, but it also means that the next generation of girls are going to grow up with all of this. And we have to find a way to help them understand that actually they can control it as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like this conversation is hopefully the start, or it's not even the start. Like Nicole, you've started it a long time before this, and we're just carrying it on. I hope it's a domino effect, and we'll continue to knock those dominoes down. I'm mindful that we are 4 minutes off the time I agreed would finish, and I don't want to take anyone's precious time. So I wonder whether to keep things concise, rather than going through the full reflection, we could maybe just use one single word to capture where we're at now, from where we started at the beginning. So if we could maybe go around and everyone could just share a word that's popped into the head since this conversation. I'm struggling myself, so just feel free to shout one out whenever you feel it's hit you.
Disrupt.
Disrupt, yes.
The conversation that needs to happen next is to get to women and explain why it's so important.
For sure. Beth, no pressure.
I mean, the pressure is certainly on. I think based on the last few minutes of our conversation, the word that's kind of sticking in my mind is just the kind of mirror, and how AI at the moment is a mirror, and the biases that are in it are because of that mirror of our society. And in 10 years' time, if we don't bring more women into the AI conversation and educate them on it, that it's not going to get any better. And I'd like to see it reflect society in a more equal way in 10 years' time.
For sure. Which links nicely to the word that just popped into my head. I think you prompted it, Beth, which is collaborate, because that's what we need to do now. And it doesn't matter how small, whether it's a conversation with a friend, for powerful, strong-minded women like we are today, coming together and having a rich conversation. Don't underestimate the power of what's happening between us right now. So we obviously want eventually to move from conversation to action. Although someone, I can't remember whether it was Beth or Nicole, I think it was Beth, you talked about, well, you need to think fast on this, but act slow. So I think the AI practitioner apprenticeship, which is what Vivian's been alluding to, it is a slow thinking course. It's not an overnight course. It's a 12-month level 4 project-based, work-based course with monthly master classes, AI action labs, real world implementation. And the most important thing is an all-female team of trainers and AI experts from the education sector, all from diverse backgrounds, leading on this, which is unbelievable. I'm so proud to have recruited, thanks to Vivian's help and many other leaders in education who've helped me pull this team together. So it really is quite exciting. And if anyone's interested in applying, you just need to go to www.cvpgroup.co.uk/AI and just tick Women Ed as your referral partner so that Women Ed can benefit from your referral. There's lots that you'll leave with. I'm not going to go through that list one by one, but I think the most important thing is education. So for me, you know, just being able to learn from other women who have experienced problems like me with OpenAI and be able to teach me some prompts, like Nicole, you were giving some good examples there of what you do. That's just the surface level of what we'll be digging into on the apprenticeship. So thank you so much for your time today. I've just written that one last quote. The future of AI isn't already written. Let's not forget that. Although these dominant stories are taking over, who write the story matters. And I want us to be part of that narrative. Today's just the start. We've unpicked and loosened that narrative. We're now going to start thinking about what story we want to write. So we're going to run this session again on the 9th of September and look at things like agency, leadership, ethics, community, collective action. And if you want to book onto that, you can just email me and I will send you the booking link, yasmin@cvpgroup.co.uk. Thank you, everyone, for your time. It's going to stop.
Thank you, everyone.